Welcome on behalf of the International Network of Museums for Peace, and in our case, on behalf of the three of us, the coordinators of this network, Satoko, Akihiko, and me, Irache. We are very happy to see all of you, friends and new friends of the International Network of Museums for Peace. And as you know, that's going to be the first webinar of different webinars that we are organizing this year, 2021. All of us are now more used to this kind of communication, webinars. And thanks to that, we are able to be in many different parts of the world, morning for someone, evening for other ones, afternoon for other ones. But that's lovely that we can share that moment for Museums from Peace. So before we start with the presentation of the speakers, I will do a short presentation of INMP for those that you don't know. Okay, let me. Okay, so today we have 5 presenters of 5 different Museums for Peace all around the world, from Dayton to Geneva to Japan to the Netherlands, that will speak to us about their sensations, about the reality during COVID time, hard COVID time, and afterwards, what happens nowadays that the museums start to open everywhere. And but what happens with the lack of visitors, with the problems of the budget, etc. We thought that having this first webinar on this issue was very important, because we are sharing difficult moments and we always can learn or have ideas from other colleagues. So that's why we wanted to start these webinar sessions with this first one. To remind you a little bit, the International Network of Museums for Peace was founded almost 30 years ago. In next year, it will be our 30th anniversary. And nowadays has more than 100 members from 19 different countries. The office of INMP is based in Kyoto. And there you have how we organize ourselves. We have the coordinators. Previously, it was Peter van den Dungen and Professor Ikuro Ansai, the coordinators of the network. Now we share this work among the 3 of us, Akihiko Kimijima from Japan, Satoko Okanorimatsu from Canada, Japan, and me, Irache Momoite, from Spain. Then we have an executive board of 10 different members, an advisory board of 12 different members from all around the world, and senior advisory board. As I mentioned, this is the first webinar, but it's not going to be the last one. The idea is that we have another webinar that is going to be more like a workshop this month, the 23rd and 30th of June. The teacher will be Concha Roda, a specialist on on strategy on museums, a professor at Barcelona University, and she works in a museum in Barcelona too. And that workshop that will have like 2 different sessions will talk about the museums at the digital age and the digital transformation. It's going to be very interesting. All of the workshops like this one are going to be recorded in a way that we will share afterwards in our YouTube channel or on our webpage. And if any of you cannot attend the workshop or would like to listen again, you are able to do it later on. And the idea is that we have new workshops after the summer and after the break of the summer. Still, we don't know if they are going to be like this, changing the times zones to be able to make possible everyone to participate, or if they are going to be recorded. We are thinking on that, but we are sure that we will have 3 new workshops. The first one in September on art and peace and activism. The second one in October on educating in peace exhibits and educational tools on museums for peace. And the third one in November about peace heritage. And that's all. I will, let me see if I can go So after this short presentation of INMP, I would like to present our first speaker. It's Kevin Kelly. Kevin, if you want, you can start sharing your screen. Meanwhile, I will present you. Kevin Kelly is the Executive Director of Dayton Peace Museum. Kevin is a native of Ohio, but has mostly lived on both US coast and overseas, and has worked in education, TV, radio, film, media, and consulting. He has advanced degrees from Ohio University and the College of Charleston in communications, political science, and education. He has been with Dayton Peace Museum since 2015 and is director since 2018. He has made major upgrades to the museum exhibits, collaboration, website, and social media. And he has introduced podcasting fellowship program with the Austrian Service Abroad, helped to produce 2 public TV series for children, create a book, and a national radio podcast on gun violence, oversaw digitizing of museum exhibitions, including the Dayton Peace Accords and Peace Builder series. Kevin is an advisor for the International Network of Museums for Peace and part of Peace in Our Cities global initiative recognized by the United Nations. Kevin.
Hello, how is everyone? It's quite early here. I'm watching joggers go by. It's about 7:40 in the morning, so I'm still waking up a little bit. But it's a pleasure to be with you today to tell you a little bit about our experience in Dayton the past 16 months. So everybody here has all kinds of stories, I'm sure, about what this has been like. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about our experience. I'm sure there'll be many things that are similar, but I tried to focus for this presentation on some of the positive things. So to tell you a little bit about the museum itself, we were founded in 2004. And you can see on the screen that our mission and our vision. Our mission is through education and collaboration, inspire people to work for greater peace and compassion. And you can see our vision. The building that you see in the photo is our current home and has been since 2005. It's a wonderful 1877 high Victorian style house, along with an outbuilding behind this building you can't see in the picture. We have about 5,000 square feet. And because I'm American, I don't know how many meters that is, but it's a wonderful building. It has beautiful architecture and design, and we've loved it. And so this is where we've been for most of our the time we've been a museum. But through COVID, we have had the time to think about things like, could we expand? And is there another place that we might consider? And that's a little bit of our story. So like most of you, the first week in March or so of last year, 2020, it seemed like things were going really well. We had many new programs and initiatives. We had arguably had our best year in 2019 in many ways, and 2020 was going really well. Here I am with a school group. We started to have lots of interest from school groups to visit during the year and in the summer. We had an exhibit that was focused on just women and a very diverse group of women. And we would have an exhibit night where we'd have a reception and people would speak. And this was right before we closed. Here's a picture of one of our volunteers working at the museum. You can tell by some of these pictures, what a beautiful building it is, and an historic building as well. So here's a volunteer who's putting in some data. We had many small group discussions. This discussion was about the opioid crisis in the US. And so this sort of salon style discussion groups were very common. We also have live yoga and meditation. This is one of our yoga teachers who would welcome people in class only. We didn't have a live version of this. We also had live meditation right before yoga every Wednesday. We did workshops in the larger facility behind the museum that I described earlier. Sometimes when I look at pictures like this now, it's almost a little scary because I look and there's no one has a mask. People are sitting very close together. So a year ago, this would not have been, a little more than a year now, upsetting. Twice a year we have an event called Hot Soups for a Cool Cause and Cool Soups for a Cool Cause, where it's all volunteer run, and it's a successful program that we have every year for lots of people, and we usually have live music and speakers. The museum does quarterly exhibits, so every few months we have a new temporary exhibit. We also have permanent exhibits that stay, for the most part, on display. So we had regular visiting hours, we had a schedule. We also supported demonstrations and other live events that were outside of the museum. This is an event about immigration, and the museum has been supportive of these sort of events that are outside the museum but are related to human rights. We also have a children's music program that we did 2 years ago with African drumming. Very successful. A lot of these same children also attended our summer camps. And here's the summer camp. This is from 2019, so this is 2 years ago. We did not do a peace camp last year for obvious reasons. We also have discussions and record podcasts. This particular one was on gun violence, which is a serious problem in the United States. We also have a book club that we run. I'm a photographer and I love photography, and so we've had several exhibits that cover certain topics, including gun violence. You can see in the background there a few of those on mostly local issues, but obviously some national issues as well. The photographs that are on the wall to the left are from a tornado, or a series of tornadoes, that hit Dayton in 2019. It was at night, but supposedly there were 18 different tornadoes that night. So a big effect on our city. This is the building from the air, and this is right before an exhibit, or not exhibit, but a festival that we did in late 2019, Peace Festival. These are just some flyers that describe this festival that we were doing in 2019. Some of the things that we also do are discussions on mental health. And this was, again, another recorded podcast, and where we brought in folks who spoke on these topics. We also did a Facebook Live event through this. We are connected with the Dayton Literary Peace Prize. And these are books that are selected every year, and there are winners that receive awards. Oftentimes, the writers will come and speak when they're presented the awards. And this was a discussion we were having about a particular Peace Prize book. This man was from a publication and a website called ProPublica, which is a well-respected news source. And he was there talking about racism. Again, another podcast. This is just some local television coverage from the Peace Festival and from the photography exhibit. You can see some of the images in the background. Those are all from Dayton. This is our small studio where we do some of our podcasts from. These are the University of Dayton, a couple of students. Each fall, we have students from Bosnia who visit the museum because Dayton is the home of the Dayton Peace Accord, which was created 25 years ago to end the war. And it is not a perfect peace, as most of you realize, but we do celebrate what happened as far as the accords. And each year we welcome students from Bosnia and Serbia to the museum, who were there on an exchange sponsored by our State Department. So this was October 2019. Again, a wonderful year. We had a new exhibit on the Dayton Peace Accord that opened that fall. Here you can see some college students starting to take a look at the exhibit materials. Like some of you, we do Facebook Live, and this was a summit by a group of teens on bullying and teen suicide. This is in the front, our largest room inside the museum. And this was a live board meeting where people were working together, shoulder to shoulder, no mask. And this was probably in December of last year. So the Peace Museum closed to the public on March 9th. It was a decision we made that we thought would be temporary. We thought that we would probably be opening up again in the summer. Little did we know that it would be much longer. So the things that stopped in 2020 were obviously volunteering. We had a nice group of volunteers who, most of whom have been with the museum for many years. All of that had to stop. We obviously could create exhibits. In fact, we did create some exhibits this past year, but no one has seen them. At least they haven't seen them live. We had to stop the podcasting temporarily. There were no more live events. We had a major fundraiser that was supposed to happen March 23rd, where we had an author coming with a new book. And every year we also do a Nobel Peace Prize luncheon where we honor our volunteers and we honor that year's Peace Prize winners. And that's something that we do every year that we had to cancel. Of course, no school or group tours and no summer camp. So what do you do with this? What do you do with a museum that's unable to open? So we had to reinvent what we could do with that. So we decided to create virtual exhibits, and I'm sure some of you will talk about that you've had to pivot to the direction of doing things online that before you would have not considered. So the first exhibit that we decided to make virtual was actually our newest exhibit, or at least our most updated exhibit, because we've had an exhibit about this topic for 15 years. But we decided that we would digitize everything. So the first exhibit was the story of the Dayton Peace Accord. And we made that available on our website, where it resides today. And as the pandemic sort of continued, we thought this is not necessarily a bad thing at all to digitize all of our exhibits, or at least the ones that the permanent exhibits first. And what we noticed was that we had a large increase in the number of people who would visit our website and watch and take a look at the exhibits we had and the links and the resources. So we started to see that although we were physically closed, there was a real benefit to making everything available virtually. And in a second, I'll describe that also included programming. So in Dayton on August 4th, 2019, there was a mass shooting and 9 people died on city streets, as has happened in many American cities, as you all know. And some of that has continued around the world in other places besides the US. But Dayton is a fairly small city, and it was a powerful event. And we decided the one thing that we needed to do was find ways to make that better. So the idea during the pandemic, and most of the work happened during the pandemic, was to do something positive with that event. And what we came up with was an exhibit. It was supposed to be an exhibit. It was really not an exhibit. It's more of a program called Facing Gun Violence. This is the cover of the book that we produced. You can actually see in the top left corner, there's the Peace Museum, a little graphic there. And most things in this book cover are significant. And so we got together and we virtually, no one was able to really meet. We did everything on Zoom. We found volunteers who would interview the people who were affected by these events and write their stories. And they would send that story to an editor. The editor would polish the story, make it better. And we collected 20 stories from people who had experienced gun violence directly, either through a family member or a friend, or even people that were there the night of the shooting. So that book was published and it's available on Amazon.com. And we also produced a radio program about it that was on the air nationally on public radio. We worked with a university nearby called Sinclair, and they had student actors who gave first-person accounts of what had happened, sort of monologues. And we recorded that as a short film. So those 3 things were what we did with a tragic, horrible event like the shooting, and tried to continue the work that we're doing even during the pandemic. We did all this online. Never once did we meet in person. The time that we did meet in person was on August 4th, which was the 1-year anniversary of that shooting, where we were able to have a public ceremony to bring in the writers and to bring in the people whose stories are in the book, and some local politicians who, this was an all outdoor event. It was August, so it was perfect weather. And we were able to have this event. And it was the only public event that day remembering what had happened, because the city of Dayton and the mayor said that it was not safe to gather people together and remember that. So we were the only, really the only place that remembered that event. So the other thing that has happened is we, just like the exhibits, we've also taken our programs online. So we have a book club And we have 2 series. These are monthly series that were always live, and now they're always online. And we're hoping, as things maybe change with COVID, that we'll be able to bring all 3 of these back to being live events. The Building Peace series is where we bring in someone knowledgeable about a particular topic, and they basically start the conversation. They're usually an expert in a particular area. And then we have another series that's called MLK Dialogues. And we take a piece of writing or a speech from Martin Luther King, and we try to bridge what Dr. King, what his topic was, what his thoughts were, to something that's happening today. So it's a series that's been very popular. And so these are 3 things that we took from being sort of retired to being back again virtually. And we've continued those, but we are very anxious for that to come back. We also realized that we could still do podcasts. We just did them remotely. So I use software that enables people, sort of like Zoom for audio. And I'd be happy to share some of that software if you're interested in something like that. So we were able to continue that as well. Last August was the 75th anniversary of the dropping of atomic bombs on Japan. And at the beginning, we thought we weren't sure how to commemorate this anniversary live without inviting people to show up. So we did a Facebook Live program from the museum outside. And you can see there's a person here from the Islamic Society of Dayton. And we set up this very large gong, and we invited about 10 people from different parts of Dayton society and different organizations to hit this gong 75 times in the exact moment of the two bombings on 2 different evenings. So we felt it important to not give up this opportunity. So that's how we did that. And as you know, everything moved to Zoom. We, just like now, we put everything we could online or on Zoom. Most of you know about George Floyd and his death a little more than a year ago. And Dayton had its share of many, many demonstrations. And as you can see from the picture, people did wear masks. They are outside. In Dayton, they were mostly peaceful. There were some problems, but for the most part, these were very peaceful demonstrations. And the museum feels it's important to support those sort of things. And so we were there. People wore masks. And from what I've heard, there was very little problem with COVID being passed along in large groups because people were so smart about wearing masks. So that's picture is from last June, just a block or 2 away from the museum. So I told you earlier about our summer camp, and the summer camp, of course, had to be canceled. There was no way around it. So we teamed up with our local public broadcasting television station, and we took the teachers of that camp and we asked them if they would do a 6-part series of a virtual peace camp. So these are 3 teachers who have 3 different specialties. The gentleman in the top right sings and plays guitar. And the lady to the left is a wonderful reader. She would do a story each day for kids. And then we have another yoga teacher who got kids to try yoga at home. So this series was part of a larger series produced by the local public broadcasting station, and in the first 2 months was viewed 100,000 times. So we were very pleased with how that went. It has since been picked up by a national program in the US called Head Start. And Head Start is a program for preschool kids mostly. And it's broadcast throughout the United States and shared in many schools. So we are also continuing that this summer, but of course, this time next year, we hope to be live once again. So probably the best thing that happened to us during COVID was we had the time to think about, well, how can we make this all better? How can we solve some of the problems that we've encountered, not just because of COVID, but even before COVID, as far as we didn't have enough space. We couldn't have large events because the space that we do have is mostly in a house. So we decided to really look at moving. And although it was difficult for us to think about giving up that beautiful house, we are in the process right now of selling that house and moving to this space in downtown Dayton's Courthouse Square. And just for historical context, the building that's at the bottom on the right with the green roof, Abraham Lincoln actually spoke in that building in 1859. So it's a pretty historic area that we're moving into, and it's very much the center of Dayton. And the fountain that you see in the picture, the green round fountain, the museum will overlook that fountain. So it's just to the left of that fountain. So these are just a few concept sort of pictures of the new museum that we're working on right now. They're beginning to construction on this site in the next 2 weeks. So one of the things we've always wanted more of was space, and that included a classroom. So one of the first things we asked for was a classroom for at least 50 people. We also are building an interactive exhibit that celebrates peace builders, or some people refer to them as peace heroes. And this exhibit will be touchscreen. It'll be large panels where people, namely students on school groups, could touch a screen and learn more about a particular person or an event. Think of Mother Teresa or Gandhi or Martin Luther King. And this is, we're very excited to have the space for this kind of an exhibit. This is not going to be the stage we're building, but it's just a concept of what it could be, a small space, intimate, and something that we can have live events easily, whether it's music or poetry or a speaker or a book talk or any sort of live event, a music series I've already planned, that we can easily have large groups of people, about 150 people, which for us is quite large. So what's next for us? This fall, we will have a ribbon cutting, which means, for those of you that maybe don't understand what that means, it's when you celebrate the opening of something. So, or something new. And so on Peace Day, September 21st at noon, we will welcome people on that plaza that you saw a picture of by the fountain and begin a new chapter for the museum. And we'll move into our facility. We have interns that are arriving from Austria. We are connected now with the Austrian Service Abroad program, and they are sending us every fall 2 interns from Austria. So we're very excited about that. As I mentioned earlier, we'll have a live film series, a live music series. all those programs that we're doing virtually now, like the book club and the building piece, will return live to that space. I'm also hoping to hire a part-time educator so that we can bring in more school groups. We will bring back live yoga and meditation and introduce compassion education classes from a professor that we are working with to get that started. We also will have a coffee bar. So it's something we've also wanted. So thank you very much. I hope that gives you a little idea of kind of where we've been and where we've been for a year with COVID. I know there must be a lot of similarities in your story about where your organization has been this past year, but for us, in many ways, the virus has been a time for us to rethink where we want to go and what we want to do. And I don't think that if there had not been a pandemic, I would have had the time that I ended up having to make some of these changes. So thank you very much. I appreciate being asked to be here, and I look forward to listening to more presentations.
Thank you, Kevin. It's a pleasure and it's very interesting. And now we will travel online, but from America to Switzerland, to Geneva. Welcome, bienvenue, Pascal. While Pascal is sharing his slides, I will present him. Pascal Hufschmidt is the Executive Director of the International Red Cross and Red Crescent Museum, an art historian specializing in photography. He believes that art and museums help us to understand today's world. He draws on his international experience in the museum sector, the art market, and the international organizations to develop large-scale multidisciplinary cultural projects with public and private partners. To date, he has been active in over 40 countries. Before joining the museum, he was the head of the external affairs of the Musée de l'Élysée in Lausanne, one of the Switzerland's flagship museums dedicated to the photography. In this capacity, he notably contributed to the creation of the new art district platform 10 and launched the Le Prix Élysée, an international prize for the support of photography, and has also worked at the Jean Rougier Gallery and at the United Nations in Geneva. He regularly lectures in Switzerland and around the world on innovation, business, development, and leadership. Now the floor is for you, Pascal. Bienvenue.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. It's a great pleasure for me to connect with you from Geneva, where we are about to welcome two key world leaders who have a lot to say and to do about peace. So it's pretty timely to be interacting with this network. I would like to present what I have imagined with my colleagues to cope with the crisis that we are all experiencing. And first of all, I'd like to tell you a few words about our museum. The International Red Cross and Red Crescent Museum is at the heart of the International District of Geneva, the world's capital of humanitarian affairs. We try to share with our visitors the complexities, the history of humanitarian action, and actively engage them in thinking with us about what this means and how it concerns all of us in our everyday lives. I run this museum with a lot of passion, a lot of curiosity for this field of activity with which I've been interacting for the past 10 years. And in many ways, a museum is a place in which you have a collection, you organize exhibitions, you have events. And for many of our visitors, that's what a museum is and what a museum should be doing. It's a place where content is produced. Now, I'm very curious to shake up this expectation that a museum is a place where you go to. And I'm just as curious and interested in disrupting the image that people have of humanitarian action. For many people, especially in Western culture and in peaceful countries, humanitarian action can often be something you see on television. It's something you hear about. It's headlines that make news every day. And this comes along with a certain set of representations, as you can see here on the screen. On one hand, images that are often the same, that come from a certain cultural background, a certain representation of humanitarian action. And here, specifically in Geneva, we, welcome thousands of conferences every year of world leaders who come and discuss related topics. And for many people who live here in Geneva, well, it looks like the other image you see on the screen, a group of people who are locked up in a conference room and who don't speak the local language and who talk about stuff we don't really understand. So I'm not judging this. I'm just, acknowledging the fact that for many people, the representation of humanitarian action can actually keep it at bay, because you see it on television, you see it in the news, you hear it on the radio, and you can switch off the radio, you can fold your newspaper, and you can just, continue with your everyday life, which is what we all do. But this can nurture the idea that it's something far away from you that happens to other people, and that it doesn't really have much to do with you at the end of the day. So when I arrived just under 2 years ago, I thought that I would try to disrupt this and think about the museum not as a place you go to, but as a content producer and as a forum for conversation in which different parties would get to know each other a bit better and go beyond a stereotypical vision of what they might think their activities are. And I was very inspired to do this by, another type of crowd that we can all connect with, conversations about peace, conversations about world affairs are not the privilege of international conferences, museums, or people who have degrees. You can talk about the world every day in your own family, which is what I do with my kids. You can see here on the screen. And why couldn't they take part in the conversation? And why couldn't they be, a stakeholder at the table? So just a few months after I arrived, we had here in Geneva the International Red Cross and Red Crescent Conference, over 2,000 participants, 192 different countries represented, all these people coming to Geneva to discuss world affairs and the humanitarian priorities of the next 4 years, and no connection whatsoever with school children in Geneva and locals.
Pascal, may I interrupt?
Yeah.
Because I don't have your presentation material. So yeah, would you slow down a little bit? Yeah.
Oh,
thank
sure.
you.
So we invited, based on our heritage, we keep a collection of 13,000 posters here of the Red Cross and Red Crescent. We produced postcards, which we distributed to 2,000 school children aged 8 to 12, inviting them to write a handwritten message to world leaders. And then we slipped these 2,000 postcards in the welcome bags of the 2,000 participants to the international conference. And that, for me, is what a museum is about. A museum is a catalyst. A museum is a forum that enables different communities to interact with one another on subjects that are of concern to all of them. And then the museum closed. As we all experienced, we had just arrived with a whole new vision for the institution, a whole new strategy, and on the 14th of March, we had to close as every other museum in the world. The good thing about this is the fact that our driving idea, a museum is not only a place, it's a content producer and it's a forum, had us prepared in a certain way to take on the challenge of the pandemic. we immediately decided to address the pandemic, to address the crisis, and to think, how could we as a museum contribute? What can we do to help our community? How can we stand by our visitors, although we are closed and although we are ourselves submitted to huge pressure? So, as all of you, I guess, we decided to go digital, and we had three key ideas. We would produce content that would be relevant, in other words, that would talk about the news, that would talk about the crisis. We would create content that would be useful. How could we help our community? And we would create content that would be native to the digital world. In other words, that would not replace the physical experience of the museum, but that would be created for and with the logic of internet. So this very quickly started, and I'm just showing you a WhatsApp image from my mobile phone, because that's how we were communicating. We gathered a group of 20 plus cultural institutions in Geneva and invited them to share with people here and around the world key elements from our collections or from our programs in 60-second videos. So visitors couldn't come to us anymore, so we would go to them. And we had museums, art fairs, opera houses, many different types of institutions. We all connected online, and we all produced this content on key elements of our collections. I wasn't expecting this to take up as quickly as it did, but I quickly realized that journalists were very eager to talk about the crisis differently, and the content we were producing as museums enabled them to address the pandemic from a different angle. So this made national TV in Switzerland 4 days after we launched it. I don't think you're going to hear the sound, but in collaboration with the tourism agency here in Geneva, we developed it to the Chinese-speaking market and to the English-speaking market around the world. You can see me here presenting from my kitchen, the oldest poster from our collections from 1870. And altogether, we produced close to 1 hour of content through all these different institutions, keeping our public connected to us. That was the first example I wanted to share with you. The second example is going back to our heritage and introducing this idea that heritage helps us understand the life we're living. And especially in the context of posters, we have this collection of 13,000 posters. It is obvious through previous Red Cross and Red Crescent campaigns that our ancestors have already been through, similar situations. And we wanted to share this idea with our audience in a sense of resilience, that, others before us managed to get through it, and we were going to get through it as well. And we took, for example, this poster from the 1920s, which was very relevant to today's way of living during the pandemic, and imagined it as a tool to enable conversations between grown-ups and children. So on one hand, it's a coloring poster, an activity for children, which is always welcome when you are all, locked down in the same apartment with your 3 young children, which was my case. And at the same time, we accompanied these posters with 10, 12 open questions, which the grown-up, the caregiver, the parents, could ask the child as he or she was doing the drawing. In this case, it's, for example, What is the little girl doing? Why is she being asked to cover her mouth and her nose with a handkerchief? What do you have to do today? Do you feel it's the same? And this was a way for us to help people put words on the huge disruption that we were going through. So we adapted a whole series of posters that not only were used in this context, but that quickly also became a mental health tool for Red Cross national societies around the world, which picked up on this content, which we of course shared with them. And suddenly, as you can see, the American Red Cross started to tweet looking for a mental health break activity for your family, as did the societies in Spain, the United Kingdom, and so forth. The third example I want to share with you is an exhibition we curated. It gives me goosepimples just to say this, because it was an unplanned, unbudgeted exhibition which we produced in reaction to the pandemic. As all of you, I was very much confused with our new way of living. And I find consolation sometimes in understanding how other people cope with the same situation in other places around the world. We were all going through the same crisis, but maybe other people live with it or go through it differently. So the idea was to team up with the international photography agency Magnum and to invite 50 plus photographers all around the world to send us live stream images of the pandemic, but not the type of images that make news headlines, not violent, shocking images. To the contrary, very slow-paced, empathetic images that were describing different situations around the world. And we received these images. We first discussed them online. It was born again from a WhatsApp conversation with a colleague in New York. And we discussed these images as ways of addressing the pandemic. So we had experts we invited to talk about the pandemic with us and through these very interesting images. We had a whole series of online conversations. And we opened an online portal to enable our visitors to send us their stories of the pandemic. On one hand, we were receiving professional images. On the other, we were receiving thousands of stories from all over the world, from people sharing with us what they were going through. We told them that we would keep this information and create an archive in our collection, which we have done. So you can see here a few examples of these images. And then the museum reopened on June the 9th. And that's when we decided to take all this online content we had produced and to deploy it through the museum. We had to change the museum in many ways to enable visitors to come back in all safety. And we decided not to put these changes on the side. We decided, to the contrary, to make them the very center of the visit. And if on one hand, the pandemic had taken over our lives, well, on the other hand, these images of the pandemic would take over our museum. So we started to put these images of the pandemic all over our permanent exhibition, creating very strong conversations between the history of the Red Cross and the current unfolding of events. Now, this is a point I wanted to make, which is, to me, the big learning curve from this pandemic. I knew before it hit us that the museum, in my conception, is not only a place, it's a content producer, and that we're not here to lecture people, we're here to have a conversation with them through our expertise and theirs on how we can together think about humanitarian issues. And this idea of thinking the museum as a forum is really a driving aspect of our strategy. We are currently expressing it, and I'll give you a few examples of how we're doing this, in our temporary exhibition called Concerned, 30 Artists on Humanitarian Issues, where we have invited young artists trained in Geneva to take a stance and to reflect upon humanitarian principles, to tell us how they understand these principles, and especially what we, museum people, and we humanitarians can learn from their perspective and create a very strong conversation here, both in the museum and online. Our visitors are always welcome to interact. We also collect all the questions they might have about humanitarian principles and how they learn about humanitarian principles differently through an artistic perception. You can see here a huge wall of questions, which is at the heart of the exhibition. Another way of expressing this idea of forum is a recent achievement. We have created a young advisory board. We invited all the students of Geneva University, so thousands of people, to join us in an advisory board which would deliberately question our assumptions, push us out of our comfort zone, and help us on a very strategic level. So here you can see the 5 students, brilliant people, who took part in the first edition of the advisory board, and we all learned a lot from each other. And I can only invite you all to give this space to young students within our cultural institutions. It's both extremely enriching and it's a huge professional step forward for them. Currently, always in this idea of forum, we are addressing every year a big societal theme, which is news for the Red Cross movement, news for the cultural world, and news for conversations we all have at home over the dinner table. The big theme, which we will launch in September for 1 year, is gender and diversity. We are working with Rebecca Amsterdam, a French doctor in economy and a feminist activist, thinking together about what a feminist and inclusive museum might look like, and expressing this as a common thread through all our projects we're going to present here at the museum, but also as a company. We are, for example, taking major steps forward in becoming a certified Swiss LGBTIQ+ employer here in Switzerland, and walking the talk is of the essence in our approach of creating this forum. So as a conclusion, I would say that the crisis has definitely enabled us here in Geneva to accelerate the implementation of our strategy. We have had to be extremely agile and extremely reactive to keep afloat and to keep, alive as a private museum, but also to keep relevant for our community and our public. And this is how we address the situation here in Geneva. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pascal. Merci beaucoup. Really interesting. We are learning a lot on new ideas. So now we will have to take our suitcase again to go to Asia. This time we are going to Japan. And here we have with us Yumi Iwasaki. Welcome, Yumi. And while Yumi is sharing her screen, I will present her. Yumi Iwasaki is the international coordinator of the Maruki Gallery for the Hiroshima panels. After working for an international NGO for over 10 years, Yumi joined the Maruki Gallery in 2019. She works with her team members to implement actions to disseminate the Hiroshima panels to the world and to launch fundraising campaign in Japan and abroad, utilizing various online platforms and offering information bilingually. This year, she also coordinates online event and video production to broaden the support base for the gallery. Welcome, Yumi, and here you have the floor for you.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay? Yes, great. Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. And it is my honor to be here today. My name is Yumi Iwasaki. I'm an international coordinator at the Maruki Gallery for the Hiroshima panels. So today, I would like to share about the challenges we faced and how we managed to turn them into opportunity, especially in the aspect of the fundraising and outreach dissemination. So I started working with the Maruki Gallery about over 2 years ago, and it was 6 months before the pandemic. And initially, my role was to support fundraising efforts by spreading the Hiroshima panels globally and broadening our support base. However, because of the pandemic, we had to shift our approach and change activities rather quickly. So I'd like to share about that today. So first of all, I would like to share a little bit about the gallery. So Maruki Gallery for the Hiroshima panels was established in 1967 in Higashimatsuyama, Saitama, which is outside of Tokyo, and to ensure that anyone at any time could see the Hiroshima panels created by the husband and wife team, Iri and Toshi Maruki. And Iri and Toshi were actually eyewitnesses to the aftermath of the atomic bombings of Hiroshima, and they began collaborating on their signature work, the Hiroshima panels, in the late 1940s. And it was during the time when information on the atomic bombings was still tightly restricted by the censorship enforced by US-led occupation forces. And the Maruki spent many years traveling and exhibiting their works all over Japan and around the world and telling people what happened under the mushroom cloud. And finally, they built their own gallery to house their Hiroshima panels. And they also painted works dealing more broadly about war, environmental pollution, and the other forms of violence throughout their career. And today, the gallery seeks to carry on Iri and Toshi's legacy of activism and advocacy, and while introducing visitors to the works of the Marukis, as well as those of the contemporary artists. So it is important to note that the Maruki Gallery was starting to shift its approach for outreach and fundraising before the pandemic. And until 2019, most of the activities of the gallery were carried out internally. So there are 3 full-time staff members and 2 senior volunteers and a few other interns and volunteers. But it was a very compact team. And in the middle of 2019, two new outside supporters joined the team, which is myself and another professional fundraiser. And it was specifically to take on the outreach and fundraising. So our first work was to create a new website, fully bilingual with updated information. And also we created 2 online fundraising platforms to be able to receive donations online, which is on the right side. And before that, calls for support and donations were through physical events and flyers, and the donations could be made only by cash or postal transfer at that time. So we needed other means to reach more people. So considering the language issue and also tax deduction issue, we set up one platform for Japan and another platform for global use in English. So originally, planned activities were a little bit different. They included meeting with donors or holding events, physical events, traveling abroad, etc. But just 6 months into it, the pandemic hit us. So we had to change all the plans. So just like many places, we had to close. And due to remote location and being a private gallery, we remained open for a while. However, from mid-April 2020 to mid-June, for 2 months, we had to remain closed. And then it was the first time to stay closed in gallery's history. So even when we are open after that, we had no school groups, no large group trips. And of course, we couldn't hold any of the events that were planned for special exhibitions or the anniversary event. It meant a significant decrease in revenue. So instead of sticking with the original plan of fundraising and outreach, we needed to come up with new ideas as to what we could do under this given situation. So this is what we did. Many people heard about the closure and then reached out to us to support us both online and offline. So we needed a means for those people to give us a hand. So that's when the website and the online donation system came in very handy, and it was very much unexpectedly. So we launched COVID-19 Closure Emergency Fund, and it was the first time the gallery accepted donations online. And then this campaign spread out widely, and to those who hadn't even heard of the Maruki Gallery or the Hiroshima panels, especially the young generation and then people who are abroad. And then this was particularly effective because it was a time that the people would not go out to a bank. And also May 5th, during the closure, it happened to be the anniversary of our opening. So we had quite a bit of media attention, both in Japanese and English, and it helped us spread the information, and then the support multiplied. And during the closure, we also started some new things. Before, we were pretty much paper-based, but we became more active in global and online dissemination. And so we utilized SNS and YouTube, both in Japanese and English. This was our new things to try. So on this slide, you see Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All of them, we became a lot more active, and we have a lot more followers now. And also, we started putting up short videos on YouTube. So we had a message video on May 5th for our anniversary, and there are over 10,000 viewers watching our video. So it was very, very nice. And then we also put up other videos on August 6th and 9th for the memorial event during the pandemic to supplement the physical event. And we also did crowdfunding to create online virtual tour film, which is in progress. And since then, we have been making more short videos to introduce our special exhibitions and also fundraising efforts. And this seems to be working very, very well. So recent activities, to share the recent activities, and considering the situation, we need to think of new ways to keep gaining supporters and fans. So in addition to existing paper-based supporter system, we also started a monthly supporter system. Yeah, this one. And we are up to 200 supporters now. And also, we are holding online events these days. For example, we offer lessons, online lessons for universities, and we also hold small workshops with small groups. And also we have live streaming events. So this image on the left side, this was from this past May 5th, which was our anniversary event. And we did our first live stream event online tour. And we had over 600 viewers who watched on live. And then after that, we archived it. So at this moment, we have about 4,500 people saw this event, and number is going up. So in a way, this was a lot more people than the physical events that we normally would have at the gallery. And now we are back to original project to promote the preservation fund to restore and preserve the Hiroshima panels. We have new projects such as donor wall, you can see here, and to give incentive to become a donor. So we are trying some new things to get more new people involved. So during this time, I spoke about fundraising outcome, mostly about like financial situation, but I talked about this because it's more measurable in a way, but it is actually not about the money. Fundraising is fundraising. And also, it is important to note that despite 2 months of closure, plus the number of visitors, group visitors dropping, the number of overall visitors remained pretty much the same as last year. So we actually have more interest in small groups. So we still have a long way to go, but many challenges ahead of us. But it is safe to say that we are going in the right direction to have more fans and supporters. And also we have new members, and full-time and part-time, joining the team, and we are moving forward. So I thought I might share some of the key takeaways from our case. The first one is a shifting approach is the key. So most likely the situation with the COVID-19, the things will not go back to exactly how it was before. So it is important to switch your mind or our mind to become creative and try out something new. And like many museums, we were forced to do it, but this actually gave us a chance to rediscover our possibilities and our strength. And the second, the supporters can be found near and far physically. So the supporters, they just need to be close at heart. So if your work is important to them, they will support you regardless of the distance. But for that though, it's important to keep disseminating and keeping updates on project and using all sorts of tools. And the third, getting reliable help does help. So you may ask, within this short time period, how can you do that? How can you move so quickly? But in case of the Maruki Gallery, it was simply not possible for limited full-time staff members to invest time and efforts to make innovative changes in such a short time. But I must reiterate that it's not possible for small organizations to do everything internally. And for us, we cooperated with experts in each field, such as fundraisers, web designers, program coordinators, and video creators. And then that has effectively led us to successful results. And finally, well thought out projects are worth investing. The Maruki Gallery probably invested in new projects more this past year than ever, but they are paying off already. It takes courage to make an investment, but when the project is well thought out, it'll pay off. So if you have a great idea, concrete plans, and a vision of success, it is worth considering investing in it, even during the pandemic. So now I will stop sharing the screen here. And I would like to share some resources in the chat, if I could. So here's the link to some of the information. If you could copy and paste somewhere and then check them out later, it would be great. And so first one is a concrete examples of how we did the fundraising dissemination efforts, which is also in the paper in INMP 2020. And the second one is the great journal article by the curator about the Maruki Gallery, if you're interested in the works of the Marukis. And then the third one is the online tour that we did live on May 5th. And there will be English subtitles in July, mid-July or so. So we would like to invite you to see the tour. And also we have other information like SNS in the official website. So I hope this presentation has given you a little bit of inspiration and ideas for fundraising and dissemination. And this is all from me today. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Yumi. Very interesting. Fundraising thing is very interesting nowadays that all of us has some problems with our budget. So now we will change a little bit the program because I know that Teresin has to go somewhere else. So before, instead of being Eric, the next presenter, we will leave now Teresin da Silva to present Anne Frank House, and we will finish with Eric. Still we have like 40 minutes, so let's try that we have the presentation in 15 minutes each, and we have like something like 10 minutes for questions and answer. Teresin da Silva is the head of collections and research department of Anne Frank House in Amsterdam. She's historian. Since 1984, she works for the Anne Frank House, and she has worked for several departments: museums, educational department, international department, communication department. Since 2002, she set up the collection and research department. And among other things, she is responsible for the maintenance of all the originals in the hiding place and for the original diaries of Anne Frank. And we are very pleased that Teresin is with us today. So here, now is your turn, Teresin. We don't hear you. Yeah.
Yes, I'm sorry. Okay. I've been closed for 1 hour, so I forgot. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for inviting me for this webinar. I will tell you something about how we managed to deal with COVID-19 in our museum. The Anne Frank House has been closed for 8 months in 1 year due to Corona. And of course, we are not the only museums that was closed. There are a lot of museums in the whole world. We just heard different stories. But also for us, it's really a major problem, especially because we are a private museum and mainly depending on income from paying visitors. Our secret annex, I don't know who has been in the Anne Frank House, but we have a secret annex. That's the hiding place of Anne Frank and her family, where she hid for 25 months from the Nazis during the Holocaust, and where Anne Frank wrote her famous diary. Our secret annex is very small, and we just opened our doors again on the 5th of June. But to keep 1.5 meter distance means that only a few people can enter at the same time. to give you an idea of the difference between a normal situation and COVID-19 at the moment, is that normally we receive more or less 4,000 people a day, 1.3 million visitors a year. Since we have opened now on the 5th of June, after being closed for 6 months, we only receive a few hundred people a day. There are very few tourists in our city, Amsterdam, and yeah, instead of 4,000 a day, we have between 600 and 1,000 a day. 1,000 in the weekends and 500 to 600 during the week. In the Netherlands, all museums have received financial support from the government that helped us to survive. On the other hand, a lot of museums had to dismiss employees. Also at the Anne Frank House, we had to dismiss 20 people. How did we try to keep the life story of Anne Frank and the Anne Frank House virtual accessible while the museum was closed? I have not made a PowerPoint, I'm sorry for that, but I will show you a short video in a while. People can still visit this hiding place from wherever they are, because on our website, wnfrank.org, we offer the secret annex online. So you can walk through the secret annex and you can see how it looks like. It's a virtual tour through the hiding place where Anne Frank wrote her diary. You can also, above that, you can also choose for a visit of the hiding place to explore it also in a virtual reality with the free Anne Frank House virtual reality app. And you can look around in the home of the Franks, so not the hiding place, but the house where they lived before the hiding place, and in 360 degrees. And that's also very interesting because normally it's the house of the Frank family is not a museum, so it's always closed. But with this with this 360 degrees virtual show, you can also walk through that. So you can get the information of how they lived before they went into hiding. Furthermore, visitors of our website can view the Google Arts and Culture exhibition, Anne Frank, Her Life, Her Diary, and Her Legacy. And this is told in more or less 20 languages. So fortunately, we were able in the past year to offer all these virtual possibilities to learn more about Anne Frank, her diary, and the Second World War. At the moment, school classes still cannot come to the museum yet, but we offer special virtual educational guided tours through the hiding place. Although preparations have been made before the Corona crisis, a new video project has been launched last year, which unexpectedly ties in with certain developments in this Corona era. And I would first like to show you the trailer.
Okay, I'm going there. The trailer. Okay. Share screen.
Ik ben Anne Frank. Ik wil iets doen waardoor mensen me kunnen herinneren. Ik ben nu bezig met mijn videodagboek. Anne, ik vind het gewoon erg dat mensen al zo'n oordeel over me hebben. Dat ze me zo slecht vinden. Gewoon hoe ik ben geboren.
Thank you. The starting point of this video project is based on the observation that young people read less than they did in the past. And they all watch videos on YouTube instead. To keep attracting young people through social media to the life story of Anne Frank, we developed the Anne Frank video diary. You just saw the trailer. It's an online video series, 15 episodes, airing on YouTube and based on the diary of Anne Frank. The video diary follows Anne Frank from 29th of March 1944. She is already hiding almost 2 years. And the format resembles a vlog, so it's quite modern. She doesn't write a diary, but she films herself as a vlogger. And the video camera takes the place of this diary. Anne is played by a 13-year-old girl, and the story begins when Anne Frank is 14 years old and has been living in hiding for over a year and a half, together with her family and 4 other people. She films herself and the events in the secret annex, looks back on the time before they went into hiding, we call them the flashbacks, and they talk about the war and she shares her deepest thoughts and feelings. The video diary ends on August 4, 1944, when Anne and 7 other people from the secret annex are arrested. The strength of this video diary is that Anne Frank speaks to you directly and gives you a poignant glimpse into her life in the secret annex. The young actress uses her camera to invite the viewers to connect with Anne in the same direct way. This format is a great success among millions of young people all over the world. And you can see it in over 60 countries, and there are 15 episodes, and they are accompanied by 7 educational videos that emphasize the fact that the video diary is based on a true story. All characters, locations, and events in the series are based on the original diary of Anne Frank and on historical events. And they deal with themes such as discrimination, scapegoating, making choices, and freedom. One of the many responses from a teacher is, I think, and I quote, "I think this is one of the coolest ideas I've ever seen. You are making Anne real to a generation of kids who relate to selfies and streaming. I hope, of course, that this would lead them reading the diary, and that's also the aim of the Anne Frank House. We had been working on this project for some years, and it was planned to be launched on March 16 last year. Exactly on that day, Corona broke through in the Netherlands and social life was shut down. And we felt that we had to postpone the release of this video diary. But then articles in the media appeared in which the lockdown situation, with its fear and isolation, was compared with Anne Frank's life in hiding. And lots of articles were published about the connection people were making with their own lives in shutdown and the diary of Anne Frank. It was amazing to read. And we then decided to launch the video diary immediately on our YouTube channel. And during this lockdown, the video diary gave us a chance to virtually communicate and educate, in particular young people, about Anne's life story. It gave us a chance we were not expecting to have, of course, because we were not expecting a COVID-19 ever to happen. It became a big success, and because if you are severely restricted in your freedom of movement, It makes you think about people who were forced to live under similar circumstances. Of course, doesn't mean that the background and context from those days during the Second World War, the Holocaust, can be compared to our present COVID-19 situation. Because Anne Frank had to go into hiding for the sole reason that she was Jewish. Her persecution, her life in hiding, and eventual death were the result of deliberate human actions. Still, you will read Anne Frank's diary with different eyes, and the current situation will give you a better understanding of certain extracts from her diary. I asked Anne's best friend, she has now 92 years, the same age as Anne Frank would have if she had survived the war. Her name is Jacqueline van Maarsen. And I asked her to share her opinion about this video diary. And she told us, I'm very, very excited about this video diary. By replacing the diary with a camera, young people can easily imagine themselves in that situation back then, when Anne Frank lived. The idea took some getting used to, but I think it's a good idea that Anne Frank's story has been transferred to modern times. And to be able to present this new project in the same time as we had to shut down, close the museum, and everybody was living in a lockdown was a coincidence. But it was very successful to be able to continue telling the story of Anne Frank and the importance of her life story for people, and especially young people today. Thank you so much, and I will remain with you until 2:30 or 3:30.
Okay, Terzin, thanks a lot. And let's now go again to the Netherlands. This time is our colleague Eric Sommers. Dr. Eric Sommers is historian and researcher at the Netherlands Institute for War and Holocaust and Genocide Studies, NIOD, in Amsterdam. He obtained his PhD at the University of Amsterdam about remembrance culture in relation to memorial museums and their role in the future. He's author of several publications relating to history of World War II, representation and memorial culture. He's also curator of several international exhibitions and museums presentations. He has been involved with INMP for quite a long time as a member of the advisory board. Now is your turn, Eric. Welcome.
Yes, okay, yeah, thank you, Irache. Thank you, organizers of this webinar, for inviting me and to give a presentation. I hope at this time no one fell asleep, especially in Asia. It's almost late at evening now. In my presentation, I would like to share with you how COVID-19 has influenced the museums for peace and memorial museums in the Netherlands. Perhaps this Dutch perspective contains elements that also apply to other international museums. Of course, I can't be complete, so consider it as an illustration for similar situations. For this presentation, I conducted interviews with a representative of the Dutch government. I spoke with the National Coordinator of Dutch Museums and to the directors of the Resistance Museum in Amsterdam and the memorial site in Vught, that's in the south of the Netherlands. First of all, I would like to give a brief outline of the situation in the Netherlands. First, I have to say there are hardly any explicit museums for peace in the Netherlands. On the other hand, there are many memorial museums related to the history of the Second World War and resistance museums, for instance. And this has to do with the impact that the history of the Second World War had on Dutch society and in fact still has. For the Dutch, the memory of the Second World War is a frame of reference for today's society. During World War II, the democratic system of rule of law was inactivated. Human rights were seriously violated. And the profound historical fact is central to the presentations and the educational programs of the museums, because living in peace and freedom is not self-evident. Therefore, stories of the Second World War must be kept alive and current, especially for young people who can connect these stories with the current events in which they grew up in order to reflect on democratic values and virtues, on values of peace and
Eric, we don't hear you. You are muted.
I'm sorry, something went wrong with changing the page of the PowerPoint, I'm afraid. I already mentioned that there are many of such museums. The Netherlands has no less than 85 museums that have this history of World War II as their main theme. And these range from highly professional museums, such as the Anne Frank House, to small scale, simple, so-called collectors museums and what's so on. But the 15 most prominent museums work together in a network. And like everywhere in the world, the pandemic hit the museum sector hard, like elsewhere. From mid-March last year, all cultural institutions, such as the museums, had to close. Fortunately, the memorial museums are in a privileged situation. Almost all museums fall under the cultural sector and therefore under the Ministry of Culture. But because of their educational significance and because of their message for today's society, the memorial museums fall under the Ministry of Welfare and Care. And with respect to the impact of the pandemic, that is their salvation. Because the 15 leading museums received financial compensation of 2 million euros for the period of last year. So it concerns a compensation for the costs resulting from the forced closure to the public and in the first 3 months of the lockdown. And this is more than other like cultural museums received. So the greatest need could be absorbed. The corona crisis also focused attention on the financial policy and business operation of the museums. The policy of the Dutch government in recent years, that's to say before the corona crisis, was aimed at so-called culture entrepreneurship. So the museums should focus more on earning money was the advice of the government. And a number of these 15 leading museums receive structural subsidies from the government, and they are quite safe. But the museums that have switched to that so-called cultural entrepreneurship at the insistence of the government are now the most affected. They depend on revenues from visitors. They need the financial support the most. Which museums are most affected? And you can compare it already with the situation Terusin spoke about, the Anne Frank House. Those museums who are particularly self-supporting and receive no or less state subsidy, for instance. Museums that depend on tourists coming from abroad, especially the United States of America, for instance. This will continue for a few years, it's expected. So this is not a temporary issue, but a long-term one, I'm afraid. And museums that are housed in historic buildings, small buildings, they can't have a 1.5 meter distance policy. And in contrast, by the way, museums that have larger space, and they were better off. And on the other hand, some museums got a boost, you can say, because there were museums where the decline in visitors was not as bad as expected. In the summertime especially, they still got a lot of visitors from the summer onwards, actually, because of the travel restrictions. Most Dutch people kept their vacations in their own country. And they visited more than ever the museums. After the first corona wave, museums closed for the second time in mid-December 2020, last year. This lockdown for museums lasted 6 months. So this week, as of June the 7th, these museums are open again after almost half a year. And in total, they were closed for 8 to 9 months. One of these days, the government will come up with a new financial support to compensate for the damage of the past year, so the last 6 months. And again, a similar amount will be made available to the museums. But now the financial spending will mainly benefit the museums that are in serious danger of going bankrupt. And the objective is first and foremost to prevent bankruptcy of museums. I'd like to share with you some observation as a result of the pandemic, and I will rush through it. One of the things is the mutual solidarity between the museums has grown. Museum wants to prevent fellow museums from collapsing, and they help where as much as possible. Another observation is that the Dutch government and the Dutch society considers it's very important that such museums exist and are kept alive. And the right to exist has been reaffirmed, and that has been shown by the financial donation, I think. An important issue is that museums are depending on volunteers, and especially in these days, it's quite difficult to keep in touch with your volunteers. And so the museums have put a lot of energy in keep this contact well, and because especially in times of need, now and in the future, the willingness to support museums proves to be great, and that's really fine. Another thing is, and we heard it before in the other talks, a strong impulse was given to digitization of the museum's own collection and online museum presentations. Virtual exhibitions were created, openings, ceremonies, and events were recorded live online. And from this, the museums learned. Digital presentations require a more specific online approach, they find out. And museums are becoming more experienced in this. Digitally, more people are reached than in traditional live activity, and a lot of initiatives has been taken, I find out. And you can say that a digital transition is underway. New digital initiative has been accelerated by the pandemic. Digital visibility is important, but it is also important that there's an awareness of the need to pay for these digital service and a kind of revenue model. I have a very interesting example to explain this and to show opportunities, but I will keep this for another time, I think, and we'll switch to another point because of lack of time, I think. Another thing is also that the museums have to deal with restriction due to the corona circumstances. And one of this is that it is necessary to buy tickets online, and visitors are bound to a time slot. And for the organization of the visit, this has advantages because the flow of visitors can be better distributed. Peak hours can be avoided, and museums can therefore better organize their staff schedules and number of staff members. And I've heard already that many museums want to maintain online ticketing even after COVID period. It's an improvement of their internal organization. And one of the thing is, and I will keep this also for another opportunity to go into detail, the mutual cooperation of the museums can improve in various ways, thinking of online ticketing, but also web shops, for examples. They are going to invent by themselves same kinds of products, and it's better to cooperate in this. But that's for another time. I will go into an example of the Resistance Museum in Amsterdam. In this museum, a lot of attention is paid to education, and a major attraction of the museum is the Children's Museum. This Resistance Museum has broken the record for highest number of visitors each year in recent times. It now welcomes more than 100,000 visitors a year. 60% of the visitors are foreign tourists. And these visitors now stayed away because of COVID-19. And even when the museum was allowed to be open under restriction, between the lockdown periods, fewer tourists from abroad are also expected for the coming years. And that means that financial incomes has fallen. And that's also the experience of the Resistance Museums. The consequences are that a planned major renovation with a new interior will not go ahead. Salaries have been cut and staff vacancies have not been filled. Now the museum will be reopened this week. The support of volunteers will be required even more than before. I will mention 3 initiatives that have emerged as a result of the pandemic in this Resistance Museum in Amsterdam. One is that the new temporary exhibit opened on schedule on February this year, but visitors were not allowed due to the lockdown, of course. And the museum therefore decided to create a digital version of the exhibition as well. And this was for them the first time this had been realized, and the experiences are very positive and they will be continued for sure. Another thing is that they developed and created for school children a special online program. That was a very, very interesting one, because a condition for subsidy for this new program is that there is a revenue model attached to it. And so for a special online visit, each child has to pay €3.50, and for the money, and special online museum educator guides the virtual visit. So the guide interacts with the school children, and he or she virtually walks through the museum. And in the school classrooms, there's a camera, and that displays the children's reaction. And they were the whole pandemic period overbooked for this special program, because their experience are very positive. Another issue is, let's see, yes, there's it's an exhibition, Resistance Museum Junior on wheels, and that's a museum product the museum developed just before the pandemic, but proved a great success during the Corona period. This project too is intended for education. The children's exhibition, Resistance Museum Junior, travels around in a 11-meter long truck and goes to the schools and festivals. And because of the epidemic, the children are not allowed to visit the museums, but with observance of all measures, a mobile exhibition could be visited at school itself. So in the truck, the young visitors get to see objects, photos and documents, and hear the accompanying stories. And in an attractive way, the young visitors learn about oppression, persecution, peace, security, human rights, and so on. They talk to each other about right and wrong, being an uncritical follower, looking away, or standing from others. All these kind of issues are discussed during a visit of this presentation. And it proved to be that this exhibition on wheel is an excellent alternative. And if visiting a museum is not possible, the museum comes to you, you can say. Maybe Satoko, you can start the trailer of the exhibition on wheels. It's just 35 seconds to give an impression.
Just give me a sec. Okay, and then share. Wait, I'm going to. Oh, Eric,
If not, it's no problem.
Can you stop your sharing first?
Somehow. I can stop.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Yep. And then. Wait. Why is this?
If not, it's no problem. That's.
Yeah. Oh, no, just. Somehow it's not showing. I don't know why. Well, with the other one, it works, so it should work.
Well, that's better.
Maybe there are too many files that are open. Wait. Let me go back again and share.
But we will share with all of you all the presentations, and there you will have the link. So if it's not possible,
right.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I don't know why.
Doesn't matter. I will continue.
Maybe later when I figure this out. Yeah.
No problem at all.
Okay.
Yes. You can see the presentation again, isn't it? It works?
Yes, you're sharing again, right? Yeah,
okay, yeah. Maybe I could try this one. But... Do you see something?
Oh, I think you need to stop your slide first and then share again.
Okay. Yep. So I don't know what happened, but anyway, we continue.
Yeah.
That's something for another moment. I will end with let's see. Yes, another. I will end with this finally. Yes, I will end with to share with you the experience with a project with in which I myself am involved and as initiator and project leader. It concerns the exhibition The Second World War in the Netherlands in 100 photos, and we had, of course, also to deal with the pandemic. I spoke about this during the 10th International Conference of Museums for Peace in September. You can see it on the website of INMP. It's a project based on a concept of creating public participation. How can we challenge the public to think critically and make an active contribution? The aim of the project is involve the public in the history of persecution, oppression, and resistance, and to pay attention to democratic values, freedom, peace, and human rights, and to make people aware of choices that individuals have made at that moment, but also to get a kind of awareness of the critical use of images as a historical source. And we thought that's also very important in this time of social media, to be critical about the use of images. The concept of our project is in fact both simple and effective, not the historian, the photo expert, or the museum curator, but the public composes the exhibition World War II in 100 photos. And throughout the Netherlands, in every district, a network of working groups was set up, motivate and encourage the public to participate. People went in search of pictures in their own environment. Local archives and museums were encouraged to submit photos that they believe best illustrate the memory of the war. And in the end, each province, each district received from the organization its own pop-up exhibition according to a well-developed concept. The public selects and searches, select photos and searches for the histories in their own local environment, and that increases the empathy. It increases knowledge and awareness about the history and consequences of the war. And the photos are linked to personal stories. The stories behind the photos are important. In this way, memories are transferred to future generations. Images are used as a starting point for a critical reflection on this past. It's a regional project, but if every region participates, it's automatically also a national project, is the idea behind it. And well, the result was 14 regional exhibition and a large national exhibition, a book and a lot of activities on social media and a lot of media attention, but above all, and that's the higher purpose of the project, public participation was central in it. The project should have peaked on March 29 this year with the announcement of the 100 photos and the national exhibition in the House of Parliament. But 2 weeks earlier, the lockdown was announced and we had to cancel our original plans from one moment to the next. And we worked for more than 2 years to this moment, actually. But the COVID-19 pandemic also presented new opportunities. We as project organization immediately anticipated on this. We improved a spontaneous social media campaign and invited more than 30 people, including several well-known Dutch artists, scientists, and TV personalities, to choose one particular photo of the project. We asked them to share in 1 minute their thoughts about this photo through self-recorded videos at home. Technically not perfect, but much more important, with an enormous power of expression. And these were then shared and liked on social media. The explanation on the chosen photos were often an eye-opener. It inspired people and led to discussion. It became, and that was unexpected, it became a real hype on social media. Not planned, unexpected. This also contributed to the realization of so-called public participation, created thanks to the pandemic crisis, but so successful that we should have thought about it actually from the start on. Despite COVID-19, many of our original goals and sustainable results could be achieved finally, such as, despite all limitation, the regional exhibition, the book publication, which has now reached the 4th printing, and a TV program broadcast on prime time, and a lot of other publicity. And well, not expected, but nevertheless realized, between the 2 lockdown periods, from September to mid-December, we were able to present our national exhibition as planned a half year before in the main hall of the House of Parliament in The Hague. And at the same time, the exhibition was shown in Amsterdam, in the well-known Amsterdam Resistance Museum. The outbreak, to conclude, the outbreak of the second wave of COVID-19, followed by the second lockdown mid-December last year, also brought this to a sudden end. And however, we found a new alternative 2 months ago that would never have happened without COVID-19. The museums and public buildings were closed, but shopping centers were open, of course, under strict COVID measures. And well, we started to cooperate with a large shopping hall in the Netherlands. We brought the exhibition from the museum to the public, in this case from the National, the gallery of the House of Parliament to the public in the shopping mall. It was a test presentation for us, and the findings were very positive. We were now also reaching an audience that would not otherwise go to a museum. In a visitors survey, the visitors were very positive. People did not come for the exhibition in the first place, but once confronted with it, they were enthusiastic. Some found the exhibition to be a real eye-opener, as the visitor survey showed. The test will be expanded in the future, and we discuss it with the other Dutch memorial museums and peace and remembrance centers, and they also see new opportunities, and we are working on plans to continue. The aim is to create joint thematic exhibitions that are accessible to a wide audience, and we think we expect that the public will be more willing to visit this than going to a museum. So despite the difficult circumstances created by COVID-19, the pandemic also brings challenges and new opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you. Thank you, all the presenters. It has been really nice presentations, very different, but with many things in common, no, due to COVID, all the suffering and all the changes, no, but something that we can see from all of you is that Museums for Peace are ready to change, no, to be open to new possibilities, and this is something that we have learned today, no. If the visitors don't come, we go where they are. If they are in the malls, we go there. If they don't pay the entrance, we try to find another way to get that funding. It's true that it's very different from one country to the other, depending on the help of the government, or we know that there is a very hard situation for many museums all around the world, and many museums, not only peace museums, but museums in general will have to close. But it's very good that we have this opportunity to share today this. There were many congratulations messages, very interesting, etc. But there were not questions in the chat. It's true that for some of you it's very late tonight, so I don't know if any of you wants to switch on the microphone and make a question. If you do, please go directly and be short, you know, not to extend too much, you know. Does anyone wants to make any question using the microphone?
Iracha, can you hear me?
Yes.
It's Bill Kelly in Australia.
Hi, Bill.
I wanted to ask Kevin something. Actually, I should first comment that the presentations were really wonderful, really interesting, and certainly I learned an awful lot about how people are handling things and the sort of things that you've all discovered along the way. My question to Kevin is, he did a lovely job of introducing us to the Dayton Peace Museum and also to the new museum. You did say something about the size of the current museum that you're selling. Kevin. And you did highlight the fact that it was a domestic building, a house. What's the comparative size with the new museum premises?
That's a great question. And I wonder if we're related, because I had ancestors who moved from Ireland to Australia and New Zealand. So maybe.
It's all right, cousin.
So the museum we have now, the house, when you add up all the square footage, and we still use feet, is right around 5,000 square feet. Again, I can't translate that to meters because I'm American, but the new space is about the same size, but it's a large rectangle. So we've been able to basically gut the floor plan as it is now, because it was not one but two banks previously, which means there's a gigantic vault in the middle of the room that we have to get rid of. So the space is about the same. It's just how we're cutting up the space is much different. So there's much more open space. There's about triple the space for exhibitions, which was really needed. So, but I hope that answers your question.
It's It's one floor of that building.
That's right. It's the first floor. So, or ground floor. Again, we say first floor, but it's ground level floor, which is wonderful because it's right off of the plaza.
Okay.
So
thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Mona made a question. I think it's for all of you. As we are approaching the end of the pandemic, there might be not the tendency to hold online events among museums and other organizations. Do you have any recommendation on how we can benefit from online events after the end of the pandemic? I don't know who wants to answer.
Can you understand? Can you hear me, Reggie?
Yes.
May I do an attempt? Well, there's a lot of initiative has been taken these days due to COVID, and one of them in the Netherlands is to work out an idea about online visit of a museum by special groups, a group of friends, a group of a company outings, you know them, and then people are traveling around to have a visit and to do some bowling or whatsoever, and they also want to visit museums. But it gives an opportunity to do this online, and we learned that Zoom meetings and meetings like we do have now have also some advantages. And one of the possibilities, for instance, is that if you organize a virtual visit to a museum far away from the place you are living. So for instance, I'm living in Amsterdam and I like to visit with a group of friends or a group of colleagues, the Guernica Museum of the Hiroshima Memorial Museum in Japan. They organize over there a special meeting with a special guide, and then you have interaction with the guide and with the other colleagues and so on to visit it. And it's also a kind of revenue model because you have to pay for it. It's exclusive, and it's an exclusive visit, but it gives also an opportunity to be 2 hours at the other side of the world in the museum. And I think that's one of the initiatives that has to be worked out and gives a lot of opportunities. This is an example I want to give.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. I think one question on all that is how to get the revenue for all those things. And of course, the use of the technology, because the museums, I think now they need to be more updated in the technology things, to be able to give those online virtual tours using the microphones and using the technology that they can have, and even to teach their workers how to do it. What is a new way of doing it. Let me see if there is there is no more questions.
Actually, I'm impressed by by what Kevin showed us, the technical facilities of their podcast studios. It looks very professional, and that's indeed one of the steps you have to make, that you have some technical improvements if you want to continue online presentations and like podcasts. But that's also one of the functions of a network, I think, is that we have to learn from each other and also to exchange experiences on this field. Like Kevin said, one of the things was that he he made a kind of approval about to share some of the software they developed, for instance, for making the podcast. And I think sharing these kinds of things, cooperation, and that will be very helpful, because otherwise, instead of that we all invented by yourself new opportunities.
And Eric, the other secret is to find a lot of 20-year-olds who know exactly how to use these tools, because that's the only thing they've ever known. Is they're digital natives. So that's another secret, is to ask a lot of questions of young people.
Okay, yes, I think this was the question of INMP, no, to share as a network. I think all of us, we have different ideas, many ideas, and sharing, we can learn from each other, no, and we can have ideas that others have that perhaps we can take to our museums, and that's the way, you know. So thank you very much for this first webinar. It's not going to be the last, as you know. The next two webinars, the 23 and 30 June with Concha Rodá, about the digital transformation of the museums. There will be workshops, very practical ones. We have given to Concha many examples of your own museums on your own social networks. So she will have examples on the peace museums themselves. And I'm sure that doing those webinars, we will share new things and we will learn from each other what it is important. And remember that the importance of museums for peace, no? Remember the importance of sharing on peace culture and human rights. So thanks a lot to all of you. I remind you that we will send you in 1 day or 2 days the evaluation of this seminar. For us, it's important if you feeling to keep doing them. And we remind you that the video will be in the webpage or on the YouTube channel. So if any of you want to share with other colleagues, it will be possible to see it again. Again, thanks a lot to Satoko and Kia and all the people that is behind the scenes, no, to be able to make this webinar. And good night to our Japanese friends, and good afternoon to the European ones, and good morning for the American ones. And bye bye. See you for the next webinars. Bye bye. Thank you.